Welcome to Let's Talk About It, a podcast created by students for students. There's a lot of talking going on these days, but oftentimes that talk seems empty. We're searching for real, genuine conversation. We want a space where we're able to talk about everything from the serious to the seemingly mundane and see how faith informs that conversation. Have something on your mind? We do. So let's talk about it. All right, welcome back to another Let's Talk About It. We are here in our 9th episode of this series, the Eighth Commandment in 2020. This is Pastor Lee, and I've got with me
Emma Keenley,
Aiden,
and Adam Geiger.
Awesome, and it's good to have Emma and Adam. This is your first time here on the podcast, and this is actually the first time on Let's Talk About It then, right? You guys, yeah, awesome. So it's kind of we have Aiden, one of the originals, and then kind of the next generation here too. So this is great. This is awesome to be here. And we've been in this series, the 10 Commandments in 2020, and you guys are new to this piece for us. And so, Aiden, do you want to talk a little bit about what we've been trying to do in this series?
Yeah, we've just been trying to take the 10 Commandments and kind of see what we can find through today's culture and see what we can use the 10 Commandments to apply to our lives now.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I like throughout the series, I've been saying how excited I am because there are, in every conversation in this pandemic with church workers, with other people that work in churches, I mean, I guess that's obvious the way I just said it. But when I've talked to them and had conversations about how are they responding to things or what are they seeing in their people, things like that, their students, like it always came back to some of the 10 Commandments. So especially when I talk to pastors here or other staff, it's like we were starting to see like walls we were running into with people, and it was, wow, that breaks this commandment. Well, some of my favorites were first commandment. We got to talk about that. I've learned to love the third commandment in our conversation there. Fourth commandment was one I was already excited for because I felt it was so applicable to 2020. I've come to appreciate, even after the fact now, the fifth commandment conversation. And everywhere along the way, there's certainly been that piece, but then the eighth commandment. This is one that has been so relevant. In fact, actually, we started a new prayer and praise service during this pandemic, just another touch point, Wednesday nights. And early in the book of James, actually, I talked about this. So there's even on our Trinity app, if you go back and watch, I bring in the eighth commandment at the end of it because it is just so applicable to everything. I think it was early June, so when a lot of the craziness was happening here in 2020. But before we get to 2020, let's talk about the eighth commandment. All right, so Adam, you want to read for us there the eighth commandment? What's that say?
So you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor.
Okay, so you guys hear that one, and what comes to mind, or what do you think about? Go back to your time when you first heard this. What are some of the pieces that come to mind for you?
Kind of makes me think of like court. Like you always think of like a testimony or something like that in court, and so like that's like what my mind always goes to. And I'm like, that's such an odd like way of saying it.
I know, and it's funny. So, like, I can imagine like being a middle schooler, being a little kid, and thinking, okay, so I'm just not supposed to lie in court, because that's the way it sounds like. All right, so what about you guys? What comes to mind?
definitely in the high school setting, like gossip is very present. Just like people like becoming who they are, they feel like low self-esteem, and it's very easy to fall into that trap.
No, definitely. And that's where, like, when I start breaking this commandment down a little bit too, then obviously false is not good. So I was kind of joking, listener, with the guys here when we were talking about it pre-recording. I think back, I've already mentioned it in another episode. I can't even remember which episode it was now. Oh, it's third commandment. Third commandment is where we talked about it with the southern version of the 10 Commandments, or the Texas version of the 10 Commandments. Again, I am terribly sorry, Grandma. If you have these in your house, it's okay. It's cute. It's great. And it helps us get there. I did a lot of apologizing to Grandma in the third commandment. But for this one, you might say it's don't lie. You know, in the same way, third commandment is remember the Sabbath day, but it says go to church. This one, eighth commandment, don't bear false testimony against your neighbor. They might say don't lie, but it goes so much further than that too. So you mentioned kind of gossip. It's just about don't lie about your neighbor. And then that testimony is interesting though, because like Aiden, you connected it to court. And so that's really what it is your words are somehow a witness to someone else or about someone else. And so you should treat your words as if they are being a witness about someone else, and it connects to this gossiping piece. Adam, what about you? What comes to mind when you think of this one?
I mean, kind of the same thing as Emma said, but more talking about how kids our age and how they share other things on social media and stuff like that, using social media as like almost like a cyberbullying type thing. And so going in further to that.
Well, and that's true. I did we even get into? I realized. So, listener, if you're here, we're getting toward the end of the series, and we've talked about maybe once all these episodes are released, because that's things we're recording them, but we'll release them kind of a week at a time and things like that. So, but doing a Q&A, and I realized when we did the 5th one, we didn't get into some issues. So we talked about anger, but we didn't get into other issues of physical harm, like we talked murder. It's murder, but we didn't talk about suicide. We didn't talk about different things, but bullying is one of those too. Of where does bullying certainly falls in line with one of these somewhere. So, and I think 8th is certainly a place, right? So when you're, especially today, because let's do this. All right, let's talk about it. Bullying, when it comes to mind, what is bullying in all reality? I mean, how do people experience bullying in your hallways or on your social medias?
I think I know for especially where I go, Concordia, it's not necessarily the physical aspect of bullying, and so it's a lot of words, it's a lot of gossiping and talking about other people in ways that just hurt them more emotionally rather than physically.
Exactly, and that's where I'm sitting there at first. Like, bullying can apply to the 5th commandment when it's the physical piece, but it's certainly fully applicable right here with the words piece, because those words are bearing witness about a person to everybody else around listening, right? Or on the social medias or whatever. So the good thing. Okay, and we won't dive too far into 2020, but that's a good one especially if we feel like we need to come back into it. So as we've been going on this journey, we have the commandment, but we've also been talking about this guy Martin Luther, Marty, right? He wanted to make it a more accessible to parents so that they could teach their kids, their children, what these things meant. And so that question, what is this, or what does this mean? So and he's always unpacking, and he's falling in line with the way Jesus taught too, because Jesus certainly unpacked the commandments a little bit further than the people in that time were understanding them, because it's not just this simple line, but there's even more to it. So Emma, would you actually read that answer to that question? So what does it mean? You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. What does it mean?
We should fear and love God so that we do not tell lies about our neighbor, betray him, slander him, or hurt his reputation, but defend him, speak well of him, and explain everything in the kindest way.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here going, if only every single Christian could just commit this to memory and drain it in the back of their heads. Because the reality is this is really tough.
That's a hard one.
Every single time we get these, they're always kind of tough in the way they expand it. I think this is easily one of the hardest. And yet like, God places it 8 for some reason. And again, we're going off of the numbering that we use in the Lutheran Church that Martin Luther used in his catechism. So if that's a little confusing, that's why we're being as clear as we can on these. So why is it so hard, Aiden? What stands out to you?
I don't know. I feel like it's kind of easy to, like, for some people to just tell like little lies about other people, and it kind of piles up, because like, you might be trying to get out of something, like somebody might be confronting you about something and you tell a lie about somebody else, and then it just starts to pile up, and then you get caught into this, you've completely ruined this guy's reputation, but it was just a lie in the beginning or something like that. And that's hard because it's something that a lot of people do on like a daily basis.
Yeah. And so with this one, with the explanation, it talks about, just not doing bad, like not, just kind of, it's easy to speak not against, what is it? If you don't have anything nice, don't say it at all. That's what I was getting to.
The Thumper's mom. Is it Thumper's mom or Bambi's mom? I can't remember. I haven't seen Bambi in a long time. Is it the rabbit's mom? Thumper's mom, right?
I have no clue.
Wow. Okay, well, Disney trivia, whose mom said it? I believe it's Thumper's mom says, if you can't say nothing nice, don't say nothing at all. That's where it came. Well, I'm sure it came from something else, but that made it popular. Bambi. All right, you're welcome. All right.
Yeah. And then, but the explanation goes on to say, but defend him, speak well of him. So that's all saying, like, you want to do good things towards them. Not only keep your mouth shut, but also be positive.
Oh,
so
totally.
That's even harder.
And I flash back when Clayton was in here because we did the 5th commandment one. And so it's like, thou shalt not murder. Easy. All right. I don't have to kill somebody. But then like Martin Luther expands it and says, but take care of your neighbor in every physical need. And I remember, I know you couldn't see it, listener, but go back and listen to it. You can kind of visualize it. Like there was this look on Clayton's face that said, wait, what? Like, I have to take care of people's physical needs too. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what he's saying. And he was like, wow, okay. And again, I think the way we've been talking about to honor the commandment or to dishonor the commandment is probably the language I would use for it. So if you want to honor the commandment, yeah, you take care of the guy who needs food on the side of the road. Totally. To honor that commandment. So yeah, so it's interesting on this one. It gets harder when you see both the negative and the positive. So to some extent, it's hard on the not betraying, not slandering, not hurting reputation, but also, and this is going to be real fun when we get into 2020, defend him, speak well of him, and explain everything in the kindness way. And just so we're clear, that's just the language Martin Luther used, but it means both men and women. Okay, so we will clarify that in 2020. I feel like we have to. So that means you have to defend each and every one of your neighbors, speak well of them, and explain everything in the kindness way. How easy do you think that is in 2020 for your friends or your peers?
Well, Lee, can you kind of explain defend in this scenario?
Sure. So let's say someone comes up to me and I love the Eighth Commandment. Okay, so I'm like, I just had 5 thoughts at one time. This is how my brain works, listener. I'm sorry. But like someone comes up to me and says, "Did you hear about Billy? Oh, Billy did this and it was so awful and so bad." Well, in that moment, what's my job? My job is to defend Billy, because like that conversation, one, shouldn't be happening. So one of my first things I should probably say is, have you talked to Billy about this? Did you confront Billy about this? Then why are you talking to me? Because then I'm honoring Matthew 18, which is a great one that I could dive into for 20 minutes. I won't do that for you. Matthew 18, great thing. Jesus gives us the drama preventer verses there to go and talk to people when you have a thing with them. So it's great. So, but then defending people too of, and it goes along with the speaking well of everything. So like, let's say Pastor Lee walks in and he doesn't seem very happy that day. And then all of a sudden everybody like is like, "Oh, Pastor Lee." And they're like, what you would say is, well, you know, we don't know what just happened. Maybe he just saw a car accident. Maybe something didn't go well at home. He's probably trying to gather himself together, stuff like that. You know? So that's what it means to defend someone, is to put their reputation and think of them in the brightest light you possibly can. And the challenge comes because who are we talking about?
Who are we talking about?
Everybody.
Oh, I was like,
no, that's what makes
rhetorical or not.
That's what makes it so fun, right? Love your neighbor. So it's talking about everybody but you. Everybody but you. Well, and again, hopefully, right, we've talked about this illustration at some point too. If you have a room full of people, right, and we're all honoring the 10 Commandments, we're all loving God, loving our neighbor, and there's this question of, and there's this layer of love your neighbors, you love yourself. So there's a self-love piece that is totally good and everything like that. But I think God was really bright in this, because if I have a room full of people who are loving God and loving my neighbor, let's say the room's full of 100 people, including you, how many people are loving you?
about 99.
99, yeah. That's great. So instead of having to look out for just yourself and only have one person looking out for you, you have a room full of 99 people. You don't have to worry about yourself because you have other people worrying about you for you. And that's kind of the idea. So if everybody's speaking well of everybody's reputation, what a beautiful world we have.
Right. That's
Heaven.
yeah.
Yeah, but not 2020, right? So let's get into it, right?
That is
so,
not
so as we
2020.
unpack it, right? So we've done that. Not telling lies, betraying, slandering, hurting reputations, right? And anything. That's anything. So like I always go pretty innocent when I talk about this one in general when I'm trying to teach it, right? A lot of times I'm trying to teach it for the first time. But like, for instance, if I go, Adam, I don't know if you've noticed this, but Aiden blinks all the time. You know? So then the next time Adam goes and he sees Aiden blink once, he's like, "Oh my goodness, I couldn't believe that. That's totally true." You know, and then he goes and tells other people, and all of a sudden Aiden's known as a guy who blinks all the time, you know, which is again very trivial and things like that. But the reality is you can't bring that back in. It's hurting it. I think of there's a great movie moment that I like to show, and I'm not, well, Adam, I'm so old. Y'all were in confirmation when I did this. Okay. So I've said that your senior class is going to be this was a weird one for me to anoint already, because I knew you guys as freshmen for the most part, and then I anointed you later. Y'all are going to be even weirder because I confirmed most of you guys, and then it's going to be that flashback to your parents standing behind you 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it is. Math, hard. But there's a movie clip from a movie called Doubt. It's Philip Seymour Hoffman and what's her name? Meryl Streep. And it was a story about feathers. All right, was the thing. So there's this priest, and honestly, the context of the movie is kind of frightening that the Eighth Commandment is being brought into it, because it's one of those like, no, bad things are probably happening. Like, I know that it's about gossip and gossip is not good, but bad things are happening anyway. So the priest goes and he's been accused of something. I haven't even actually seen the whole movie. I know the context, but so the priest gets up to preach something though, and he's talking about gossip, and he's telling a story about another priest who a woman came and she said that she gossiped, and so he's in a confessional with her, and she's saying, "What do I need to do?" And he says, "This is what I want you to do. I want you to go take a pillow," and that back then it was like not cotton, but like feathers, right? So he says, go up to the top of your building and I want you to gut the pillow, okay? And then come back and talk to me. And so she does this. He comes back to the father and she says, did you go? He said, to the top of your building? Yes. Did you take the pillow with you? Yes. Did you gut it? And she says, yes. And he said, what happened? And he goes, and she said, feathers everywhere, feathers. And so they're all just falling down everywhere, going crazy all across the town and things like that. And he says, now I want you to go back and I want you to pick up every single feather that fell out of the pillow. And she said, that's impossible. And he said, that's gossip. And that was the reality, right? Is you can't, once the word's out, you can't take it back. You can't put it back in the pillow, so to speak. And so that's how harmful it can be. Now, on the other side, right, if you're always speaking well of everybody, all those good word feathers flying around, wouldn't that be great, right? But not in 2020. So when we turn the conversation to 2020 and that's kind of that positive, instead defend, speak well, explain everything. But how are we seeing this play out in 2020, guys?
Not well. Not well at all.
Not well. So what? For better or for worse?
What do you got, Adam?
I think a lot about Twitter. You know, it's such just a big gossiping kind of informational resource for people to put out their minds and speak their minds. And I mean, everybody's guilty of it. And you have something to say about somebody, and you want to speak your mind. And so that's kind of where, you know, it is a trap. You know, it's hard to stay away from that and to fall away from all those things you really want to say about somebody.
Oh, and so what kind of stuff do people say? And of course, we don't need to break the Eighth Commandment about anybody. I threw Billy under the bus earlier, but what kind of stuff do people do or say? How are they hurting reputations?
I think it's a lot about, maybe for sports, for example, there's just the way people talk about what they did in the sports game and the way their minds think about it. So if there's a basketball game and something happens and they pass it over to the wing and they were trying to keep the ball away from somebody else. It's the stuff like that. They're bringing up things that may not have happened.
Oh,
and in order to, like, that's one that I've seen recently with the NBA is teammates going at each other for stuff that on the court.
That's fascinating. And it's a different way, right? A different world. Because normally, like, without Twitter, those conversations would just happen on the court or things like that. But now it's like,
it's brought to
now a
everybody
million
to
people
see.
just saw that.
Right.
I think also, like, it makes it so much easier to gossip. I mean, before you had to go to a person and tell them the story, but now if someone posts, you know, an out of context video, you know, one screenshot and you can send it to 30 people, which makes it so much more, like, accessible to spread those bad things. And because you're not in person, a lot of things can be miscommunicated and, like, twisted to, like, someone else's point of view.
Tone is really important. And so being that over the phone, you don't get the tone, the sarcasm, the stuff like that may be implied.
That's true. I didn't even think about it. So you brought up a couple of different things, right? Clipping a video, which is one thing, which like brings up a million issues in 2020, right? And then also the idea of a screenshot or something like that. So I've even seen, very rarely will I see like a TikTok or something like that, but I've seen one or some where like someone will send someone a question that's like not a good question. And then like the person will be like, yo, why'd you say that? And they say, what did I say? And they'll send the question back to them and they'll screenshot it and share that with other people. It's like, oh no, like what a prison, you know? But that's it. Well, and so even as we've been recording, like we have to watch what we say because someone might clip what you say and then take it out of context and things like that. I mean, it's that kind of a crazy world. Well, and I'm going to throw on a more philosophical question here, I guess. Why do people do that? Like, why do you think people want to do that? What's the motivation?
Attention.
Fame, attention.
I think also, like, it gives you like a way to talk to somebody. So if you're new to a group of friends and you have a piece of gossip or something about somebody, all of a sudden you have a conversation piece that you can bring in and you're like in the group, right?
Nice
and,
icebreaker.
Yeah, I mean, really. And so it's like an easy way to get people's attention and then be interested in you.
Sure. And that's crazy though. Because I'm sitting there, like, especially like Aiden, you'll be heading off to college and things like that and meeting new people.
Ooh.
And I think about that experience, right, of people doing that and trying to meet new friends and things like that. And like, what an awful way to start a friendship. How'd you guys meet? Oh, she was telling me about Ashley and like, like you know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting in on that front too. So like, wow. I didn't even think about that though. Like screenshots, clipping videos, taking things completely out of context. Well, let's just go ahead and do that, right? So 2020, I was thinking of different videos where we didn't necessarily have the full stories, right? I can think of multiple one. And the one, let's go the more innocent one. Did you see the bird watcher one? I don't even remember his name.
No.
Like you didn't. None of y'all saw the bird watcher one.
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
So like, well, and again, it was bad situation all the way around. And again, not to. Well, it's probably good I don't know names. But there was a situation where a woman in some park, some famous park maybe, was walking her dog, but it wasn't on a leash, and the man demanded that she put the dog on the leash. And then the video clip that you saw, which again, like there's bad on both sides of this. That's the reality of all of this, and that's why it's so important for us to like keep in mind, even when we're having this conversation. I have to qualify because I don't want to break the Eighth Commandment. But like when the video that most people saw was this woman not doing the right thing and calling the police, and the first thing that she says is, and this man was bird watching, right? That's what he was doing, walking around the park, and she was just mad at him for trying to tell her to put the dog on the leash. And so she calls the police and says, there's a black man trying to kill me. And that's the first thing she says. Yeah, so it's clipping the video and things like that. Now, what you find out, there was a longer drawn out, maybe the man was a little more aggressive about the dog and said things about the dog that he shouldn't have. So again, all over the place, though, Eighth Commandment's being broken because you have her lying. He's not threatening her life at all, but she knows that's going to get his attention, getting it back away. And then you have the other context of, okay, were you a little aggressive? So wrong on both sides. I'm sitting there like, if I was a camp counselor again, I'd be like, you both need to apologize. You're both going to timeout, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of the way it works. Well, and then certainly going a little more controversial, a little more light of a subject, or deep dark of a subject, not light, was the Ahmaud Arbery case too. And so you just have a clip of a man jogging and losing his life to two people with guns. But for the longest time, that's all you had. Like, and the reality was, and I'm one in my social media practices, I know I can't form an opinion about this. I don't have audio. I don't have the longer clip. I don't have the context. I don't know why this man is running. I don't know why these two gentlemen are sitting in a pickup truck with shotguns in the middle of their neighborhood. I know nothing about this whatsoever. But man, did you see opinions after that video? Mm-hmm. And you saw, at least, again, they were asking me, why did you put Facebook? I have Facebook, and Facebook was a dangerous place during that time. Everybody had their opinion in the world about that situation. And certainly as the trial's gone on and things like that, there's been even more information and things like that. But man, how can you try and form an opinion about anybody in that video in that moment without the full context? You really can't. And I guess this is where I'm landing too. Let's just apply that to life. How can I apply anything someone says to me if I'm not there? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's a layer of it too. Okay, so you told me Billy and Ashley said this, but Billy and Ashley aren't here to even say their piece. All I'm doing is taking your side of it too. Takes me the nerdy side, and then I'll shut up for a second. Sorry. My capstone in college, so I was an English major. I like to read. And I like to tell other people to read because it's a good thing.
Reading's good.
But my capstone was actually on questionable narration in books. So like for instance, it actually started my junior year of high school. Did y'all ever have to read like Heart of Darkness? Have you heard of that book? So there's this guy who is telling a story from England about his journey to the heart of darkness in Africa, in the Congo. And he comes back and tells his story. Well, here's the reality. I don't get the story of anybody else that's on that trip. I just get this guy. He could be lying about everybody, but he gets to tell the story. It's kind of like history. The victor gets to tell the story. And so I actually, my senior year of college, got to talk about this in Faulkner's As I Lay Dying. I got to talk about in Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse of just, can you really trust everything you're reading in a story? No, it's from someone else's perspective. Anyway, nerded out. Your turn. All right, so 2020, where else are you seeing this then?
Well, I think kind of what you're saying, you can't base your opinions off of the little stuff like that. You have to actually be there to see a lot of it. And even to what you were saying in previous episodes about the protests, you can say that for your own experience where you went and it was completely different than a lot of people were shining a light on it.
Yeah, well, and that was actually like one of my, so this series actually probably was birthed from that experience, because that was when it really became relevant for me, was that I wanted to go. I knew how media works. I knew how social media works. Everybody's going to put the worst stuff out there, talk about everybody in the worst light. Nobody looks good on social media, right? So I wanted to go. I mean, there was this walking with George Floyd's family in Houston, and I wanted to see what it was like. And I've talked about that experience. It was a great experience. Even with the police officers, we talked about that. They're walking along saying, "Hey, thanks for being here. Just stay safe. Keep it cool," stuff like that. It was good. But I go home that night and I see people posting and saying, "Oh, okay, well, Houston was calm today, but wait till 10 o'clock at night," or something like that. Or there's no way it was that peaceful. Like that was kind of the stuff I was reading on social media, and I was there, So I was one of those who was, again, I will use that word protest, right? And we have protest and riots, two different things. But to talk about, and this is where that James sermon went, was when we start grouping people and not defending reputations, but tearing down reputations. Like, so can you see this start to play out? Like, what are some scenarios where you see this playing out then?
I mean, like, especially on social media, it's easy to manipulate the videos and information the way that you view it, right? And so even it's like a trap if you see like statistics and you're like, oh, like it's a fact, like it's real.
Right.
But like even then those can be seen like in a special like target group, and you don't know what that group is. You don't know like what the context is of that. And so it's kind of dangerous, like, because you want to inform yourself, but you also like are, hearing a bunch of biased opinions of what people think on both sides of, the protests and riots.
Exactly. And the reality is, okay, I think we said there were 60,000 in Houston that day. And the reality is that means there were 60,000 of my neighbors, like 60,000 of my brothers and sisters, 60,000 people with 60,000 different experiences and backgrounds and reasons why they were there. I was there because I felt convicted to be there, actually. So a friend of mine, a teacher over at Concordia, had posted saying, "Hey, I'm going. Who's going with me?" And I said, "I would like to, actually." And so that's why I went down there in the first place. And it was good to be able to walk alongside of both former students and current students and peers, a couple of teachers from Concordia over there too, and just to be there, right? But then to hear like people just qualify anybody that goes on a protest right now or is crowding out there as a thug, I was like, okay, cool.
Lee's a thug.
Yeah, what up, thug life? But it was interesting though, just to see that perspective, and actually it was like a little bit of an experience in anthropology, a little bit, so study of people watching a little bit. So people were there, and that teacher, and he doesn't care. Uma was there, and he was sitting there, and I was asking, "What's on your brain, man?" And he was reflecting on all the different reasons why people were there. So you certainly saw people that were there that were angry, they're coming from a place of anger. And then there's coming from a place of celebration a little bit, of there's actually a change and movement going on. And like, it was just interesting, or self-reflection or whatever. It was just interesting, all the different, just looking into people's faces, perspectives they were coming from. But like, what do? We group people. We like to do that. And so where else do you see people grouping people? So
Well, I was going to say, now, not saying that it's just nowadays, but it's definitely hard to make a solid opinion on things when you have so much bias towards things. And it makes it to where, like even for like political stuff, you don't want to try and be on one side or the other because you
don't want to be labeled.
Yeah, you can't, because then you're known as this and you're known as that. You're not known as just a person that has an opinion kind of thing. You're known as, oh, you're stereotyped into this group, or you're stereotyped into that group.
So, and I faced this, I think I've shared this at Crew before, but I faced this in high school. So I've known since I was 15 years old I wanted to be a pastor. It's just one of those, I found a home at church. I knew that was the one place where I felt like loved, cared for, things like that, and certainly had a gift. That's what they told me from a young age. So I knew I could talk about God in ways that supposedly people were like, "Have you thought about being a pastor?" I was like, "No." Like, why would you tell me that? So, but anyways, even as I grew up though in high school and knew I wanted to be a pastor, to talk about being a Christian was a hard thing, because that means you are this, and have this to say about me. I mean, I remember, I think I've told this story before at some point in the last 4 years here, of my friend, let's get another name. We'll go Ashley, since we've used this Ashley name before. But this friend of mine was Jewish, and I was walking out of calculus senior year. She's crying at her locker, like absolutely bawling and things like that. She ended up being my senior prom day that year too. So anyways,
nice.
But she's a good friend, right? And we had class together down the road. And I go, I was like, "Ashley, what's wrong?" and apparently somebody in her previous class, a Christian, had told her she was a moron for everything that she believed and all this other stuff and things like that. I was like, well, here's the fact. He's a moron because what you believe is half of what he believes if he's truly a Christian, right? So like the whole Old Testament, New Testament thing. But it's just interesting, right? So that's why it was so hard, because there was this branch of Christian, or that had a reputation of being this, that was so hard to then talk about your faith in a context because people painted you in a certain picture. What I learned was, just put it out there and people will talk to you, and out of the conversation they'll realize you're not that picture, because people do. Christians do hurt people, and a lot of times in the Eighth Commandment, for sure, and the way that they talk about people or things, forgetting that they are flesh and blood creations of God, right? Mm-hmm. Created in his image, things like that. I mean, Pastor Chris is getting us started up here at the beginning of the year, and he's coming back to a few refrains that we've heard this summer in staff meetings and things like that, and the reality that you will never walk past a person that Jesus didn't die for. And you will never walk past a person that was not made in the image of God. So how do you treat him? How do you talk about him? Every single person, even that person who's on the opposite side of the fence of you on absolutely everything, even that person who's mean to you, even that person, whatever, every single one of them, right? So it's kind of interesting where we all land in those different places.
What are you thinking, Adam?
I'm just listening right now. I'm kind of enjoying. I'm kind of being a listener at the moment.
Yeah. Well, and so we think about this, right? So the protest was a certain thing. And again, riots, even the way you talk about that, right? But you're grouping people. If they're in the street, they're that. Or the mask conversation. If you're not wearing a mask, then, right? Just assuming that about people. And the reality is we can't assume anything about anyone right now. Like, we can certainly stand in our place, and maybe it's more of the American than the Christian in me speaking right now, but like we can certainly say, I have my right to stand where I'm at, and you have the right to where you are. And there's certainly a layer of public health and things like that. I think we've talked about it a little bit already on the series, but at the end of the day, I can't assume anything about anyone because I'm not in their brain. I'm not in their shoes. I really cannot understand their experiences. And that's really where the protest thing got me, was what did I learn from that day? What was this movement all about, right? Because there's this big conversation of the Black Lives Matter movement and the Black Lives Matter organization and cultural Marxism and all this other stuff. And so anything that uses the letters BLM, you can't trust it. And the reality was, what did I learn? What did I take away from that day? Was that people just want to be heard. They want their experiences known. And from that, if change happens, that's a good thing. And I think even we talked about in a previous episode, law enforcement officers would say, yeah, there's certain things that need to change. We're recognizing that too. So it's that weird conversation of, instead of just completely dismissing or canceling or whatever the word is these days, like a matter of just hearing people for their own individual person and who they are.
Yeah. It's crazy because we talk about that, but that's like just in everyday life with just everybody. It's not like, just because it's media or whatever. It's like even in your own household, it's the same way. You can tell a lie about your brother just to get him in trouble or something like that, or your sister or whatever, just to mess around with them, or to get your parents riled up or whatever. And it's everywhere. It's hard to escape.
Well, and the reality, too, it goes back to what we've already done. Can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all. But it also goes back to, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't assume just because you've seen something or even you've heard something that you even know why it happened. So I mentioned, like someone even in your household can come home and not be very happy. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, I can get sarcastic. I can get them riled up. But I have no idea what happened that day that's making him feel that way, and the same thing, like, just because someone looks a certain way, right? Pastor John likes to talk about when he first came to Trinity, and he has a tattoo on his left arm, and the first time that he went to do the benediction and lifted his hands up, he already had the earrings, I believe, and so that was already scandalous enough, but then he lifted up his hands and the robe, the sleeve fell down, and you saw the tattoo on the arm, and it was scandalous. So scandalous. They didn't know how to take this California boy that had tattoos and earrings, And so it was kind of, now they know him and love him because he's been here for over 10 years, but it's kind of like they were judging the book by the cover. And it was just another lesson learned of someone who is very different than me, looks different than me, has different experiences, just like they don't know anything about me from looking at me. I mean, I definitely felt that growing up because I was in honors classes, but I played sports, and people always, you can imagine the conversations that people have with me, like, how is that possible? Why are you smart? Like, things like that. It's insane.
You're a tryhard.
or try hard. Yeah, but I mean, like, or if like the fact that I will nerd out over Harry Potter and I played college football. Like people are like, how is that allowed?
It just doesn't.
It's breaking the rules of how I understand the world to
Of
be
an athlete.
Yeah. Or like holding the values. Anytime you hold the values and you're an athlete or you're whatever. I was in a fraternity and people were kind of like, how can you be in a fraternity and become a pastor? And I was like, because I'm my own person. Crazy. Like, yeah.
So we were kind of talking not necessarily about the negatives, but about the things that happen that are not permitted by not necessarily permitted, but are not wanted by the commandment, like betraying your neighbor, lying about your neighbor, all that good stuff. But
all that bad stuff.
Yeah, well, the bad goods.
Right.
You know what I mean, man.
I know what you mean.
All right. But we have yet to talk about the positive side of things.
Sure, yeah. So what does it mean in 2020 to defend your neighbor, speak well of them, explain everything in the kindest way? How do you see this applying?
So, man, this is hard. A group of my friends, and this may not be relevant, but a group of my friends have been going on with something we've kind of called a worship night. And so this has been sometimes Sunday nights. We try to do it every Sunday night. It doesn't happen. But we'll kind of come together and we'll do some devotions and we'll sing some songs and we'll kind of just be friends and just be positive about what we have to come and stuff like that. And so I feel like that's a small picture of how everyone should be in this time.
Exactly.
And so although there are the stuff like Twitter, we need to find ways through maybe Twitter to find the person or be the person that is the light. And as hard as that is, it's necessary.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, the idea of coming back to center, or a place that you can come back to center, or like that person that can call you out, you need that.
Accountability partner.
So if you walk into that situation and you're talking mess about people, they're going to say something. They're going to bring you back to center a little bit, because it's like, okay, what, like, that's crazy. And it's hard to say this in a pandemic, but that's why God placed us in a community. That's why he gave us one another, is so that we can have that. And we can place it in front of us. Again, I think I go back to that fifth commandment with Clayton going, He's going to think differently the next time he sees someone on the side of the street, because he's going to be reminded of that promise. And for us, maybe the next time we hear someone say something negative about something or things like that, we can say, well, do you think we fully understand that reality? Or we might not know what's going on back there. And there's certain pieces, right, that are not defensible, but at the same time, let's not hurt reputation beyond what's already going on, right? So if I see someone destroying things or hurting someone, I'm not going to stand back and say, no, let them do that. They're just, no. Like, they need to stop, like you shouldn't cause harm in another way. But I'm also not going to go around and say, did you see what Johnny did? He was destroying things, cracking things down. You're noticing my trends of Johnny and Billy and Ashley. There's some sort of like Lees in there. I started as a camp director, and that's how I did it, right? Little Billy got in a lot of trouble in my camp stories all the time. Yeah.
Tank.
Yes, that was my camp nickname. So, okay. So here's the ultimate question then. How are we doing at explaining everything the kindest way in 2020? 1 to 10. 10, we're doing fantastic. 1
-1.
1 to 10.
I was going to say 2.
Who are we talking about though?
Our communities, our world, and when I say world, I mean your world, right? So again, I don't know what your world looks like compared to my world. So my world, I'm looking at Facebook, I'm looking at my people I work with, the people I talk with and engage with. So in your social medias, in your world, Emma, you had a 2.
Yeah. I don't know. I think sometimes it's really present in friend groups that we don't realize. Like, it's very casual to tease somebody, and like that's like your way of like including them or getting them like laughing about something, but like you don't realize the danger of what you're saying. And it's like there's no like harmful context behind it. But and also people have like mastered the way of saying kind things and not meaning what they say, instead of like having like 2 meanings behind something. And so I do think there's hope, and I think that there are some good things that I've seen and some great people who are great examples. But I'd say 2 is like a hopeful 2, rounding up 2.
Rounding up to 2. I like that. Aiden, how about you?
In my community, I guess. So basically, my family would have to. If it was just my family, it'd be like really low. But like, if including everybody else, I'd probably have to say like a 4.
Okay.
A 4 or 5, because like I feel like a lot of people really do pick up people around, just being nice to people, and just, like I had the opportunity to go up to Colorado and visit my dad, and they have a church up there that we go to, and it has a soup kitchen attached to it. And so during all this Corona stuff, we actually went up there and helped, do a lot of the soup kitchen stuff for that community. And just getting to go to that community and seeing like what their thing was like, it honestly gave me a lot more hope for what, America could be, hopefully. But it's if once you kind of experience that, you really see the good in the world, and you don't even recognize the bad.
Sure. And a piece of that is hearing their stories, right? So I know, Emma, when you were in 8th grade, you got to go on the junior high mission trip, the first one we had, right? But like when you get to step into someone else's shoes and hear their perspective and see their thing. I mean, I've heard plenty of people talk awful about people who are on the streets or homeless, but the reality is I don't know their stories until I hear them. And even when I hear them, I've heard individuals. I don't have a collective perspective on what the homeless population is all about, but at least I've heard from individuals, and I'm able to defend my neighbor now in a different way. Yeah, so it's the same thing. When you get that experience, you start to appreciate things a little bit more and not be so dishonoring of the Eighth Commandment. Adam, how about you?
As much as like stuff like the news and stuff like that places a pessimistic view on everything, I think that there's still, through Trinity and through going to NYG last summer, I mean, seeing all those kids come together, a bunch of faith, a bunch of just people like us, wanting to spread God's word. There's still a lot of hope. And going to work camp, not judging somebody based on how they are, how they look, where they live, and actually getting to meet their character and meet who they are personally was just really impactful for me, and gives me hope for maybe in the future and stuff to come. Because I had a family who in work camp they were split, and so it was just the mom living there, the wife, and she just had a horrible time with everything, and she could not get up and get around. She had a hard time getting around, and she was just kind of struggling. She didn't have any much positivity. And when work camp came through and she saw kids and gave her energy, gave her things, and she started to, get motivated to go work out and stuff, and just be a person and get back out in the world, and her life's not over, So I think that there still is more to come, rather than everything just being so negative as it is on the news and Twitter and social media.
No doubt about it. And we've talked about this on this series, like tough year. Like every election year, I'm not happy for 2024, right? Regardless of what happens. There'll be another election in 4 years, unless Jesus comes back, which will be great too, right? But the reality is, like, that does seem to be the nature. If I had to I'd probably do a rounding up to 3 in my world, and I'm saying like my social media is, especially the Facebook, is just miserable. Like I should get off of it, but I don't want to miss something big happening in people's lives.
It's juicy.
It's just crazy. But I'm in a similar place. I'm hopeful, and what gives me hope is conversation. And that's the thing, is just allowing yourself to listen to someone else, someone that you don't know, allow yourself to hear their story, and hopefully maybe even be able to share your own, because like that's a beautiful thing too. We're all wired in different ways. Just because we all look similarly or talk similarly or have the same faith or are from the same areas or anything like that, or listen to the same music, doesn't mean we have that much in common. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing, the diversity piece of it. So kind of honoring that. And with that though, I mean, this is let's talk about it. And so we've certainly had a conversation here. But my hope is that more conversations will come from this, because especially on this topic, I think there's so much of an opportunity for us to go out into this world and change directions in our own little circles, at least, and have that little bit of influence. And again, that little inch goes a long way in a lifetime, right? Every little inch goes a long way in a lifetime when you look back on it. So what are some of the conversations after the conversation we've had here that either you're hoping is more present in your life, or what are some conversations you're hoping people are having as a result of this in their worlds?
Definitely just like not jumping to conclusions, instead of, if you are sent that thing, right? Sometimes if you're not ready to confront the person who sent it to you, like the screenshot, maybe reach out to the person who is about, see how they're doing. So if you're not ready to stand up to the person who like is a friend and is doing something wrong, you can always look for that neighbor who is being, spoken badly about.
Yeah, totally.
I think mine is, why don't we just be nicer? Seems like everybody has to be so hard on each other, and we have to always, like she said, jump to conclusions about people and have to categorize people into certain spaces. And, if you're this, then you're that and all that. I think we just need to recognize that people are people, and, we can't take that for granted. And we have to just remember that, we're all in it together.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
I think it's a lot about that, but taking baby steps to get there, and it's not just going to be something. It's not to just change right away, because it's going to be a process. But going from in the commandment, talking about slowly going from telling them lies and slowly going to betraying them and getting away from that slowly, and then even moving into more defending him and being positive towards them, even though the odds, you might have your reasons why you shouldn't be. So taking your steps in order to get to a better, more positive you.
Yeah, and y'all are reminding me of, I've told this, again, there's certain things that I'll be a broken record at some point for people that listen to me long enough, right? But I remember my last year of seminary, right? And so it does, because there's this layer of being more positive, but specifically about being positive about people, or being positive about things you're not positive about. So my last year of seminary, buddy of mine, Tyler, he's a pastor now in Grand Rapids, and we had this thing. We worked the registers together. So I don't know if you know this, but if you've ever worked the registers anywhere, it's not always the grandest experience. There's a level of it. Like when you're a kid, I was that kid that when like the Kroger came to our elementary school and set it up, I was like, I want to work at a Kroger. This would be awesome, because you get to use the cash register, you get to scan things, you get to bag them, things like that, right? And Emma, you got the HEB experience now too. I thought it was the dream when I was a kid. Well, then I go to work it's just the registers. It's the easiest food job in the world, for the most part. But still, people would be negative, and so Tyler and I'd be there, and just in general, you can find yourself in that space of negativity. And Tyler and I found ourselves being very negative sometimes. And so we started this thing together called Gimme 5. Have you heard me talk about this before? Mm-mm. So anytime we made an agreement with each other, and it changed our worlds, it really did. Anytime one of us said something negative about anything, and if it was a classmate, if it was a class, if it was something, we would look at the other and say, "Give me 5," and you would see this the cringing, the teeth. No, I can't believe I did that, because what you had to do is what you just said something negative about, you had to now say 5 positive things about that. So let's say like somebody made you angry in class because they said something, you mentioned it, give me 5. I now have to say 5 positive things about that person. Or I had this class and I now have to say 5 positive things about this class. Or I can't even think of other things that came up. But it was a constant thing. And man, our worlds changed because we did. We were sitting around a campfire one night and we were talking about how negative, and that's where it came from. The give me 5 was sitting around that campfire because the negativity was destroying us and we recognized it. But it's about finding that. So I hope we're able to have those conversations. I hope maybe the next time you hear someone talk about someone, or the next time you hear someone talk about a group of people, you're able to say like, maybe we don't have the full picture. Let's humble ourselves just a little bit here. And someone will get mad at you and say whatever and things like that. But at least it was said. At least an inch was taken and that kind of a thing. So that's the kind of conversations I'm hoping you're getting to have, listener. Again, just talking a little bit more and having that level of humility that I don't know everything and I can't possibly know the background of someone else because no one else knows mine too. And bring it back to that every single time. Just remind yourself, man, if I was in that situation, how would I hope someone talks about that? That's what it means for me to love my neighbor as myself. Especially in 2020, that's how we can apply the Eighth Commandment. Send us your questions, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. Emma, Adam, Aiden, thank you guys. It's been a good conversation. Hope you guys have enjoyed this one, Eighth Commandment 2020, and our final episode is next. The 9th and 10th commandments in 2020. We get to wrap up this series. So I hope you stick around and are able to listen with us. Listener, thank you for listening so far. I hope you've enjoyed the ride. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk About It. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to give us a follow. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform, the Trinity Klein app, or both Instagram and YouTube at TK Crew Students. Have a topic in mind you'd like us to use as a theme? Let us know. Let's talk about it. We'll see you next time.